Hey guys, welcome to an oddly specific video. Normally the stuff I do is more for accidental DBAs and is out on YouTube for the world to see. If you've come to this one, somewhere you found a link to how to set up an Azure VM for Brent Ozar's Mastering Series classes. You know, if this thing gets 100 views in its lifetime, I'll be actually pretty impressed. If you've bought some of Ozar's training, he gives you an option of he can set up an AWS VM for you, and you don't have to worry about it. It costs a lot of money. Or you can set up your own VM. Those are basically the two options. I went with that second option because I know how to set up a VM, and there was some gotchas to it that I'm just simply trying to save you the hassle of sorting through those specifics with this video. So, all my contact information is right there on the screen. You can feel free to ignore that, put comments in the video if you have questions. No guarantees I'm going to answer anything right away. If you email me stuff, that's fine. Again, no guarantees. Obviously, the source of truth, if you want to know something specific, is Brent himself, because he knows what is required for the training, and it's all documented in the prerequisites for the class that you bought. So, you know, these VMs obviously can be used for anything, but they're super powerful. And in the Azure Dev region, I believe this one costs me like $30 a day just for the VM. And I'm going to go through a little bit of that here in a second. So let me pop over. Let me kill off this PowerPoint because we don't need it anymore. I'm going to pop over. This is my Azure portal, and there's nothing in here, so don't get really excited about, oh, we're looking at Kevin's stuff. This is just for the Ozar classes resource group that I've got set up just for this VM and its associated resources. First thing to note, if you don't have an Azure subscription and you're not familiar with the portal, you probably want to go figure that out first. So, and then come back here when you're going to set up your VM, because there are some very specific requirements on this, specifically RAM, CPUs, and the fact that it's got some NVMe storage. And I honestly have no idea if I'm saying that right. NVMe, whatever. I'm calling it NVMe because NVMe, I'm great. No. But when I created my machine, I did it in the East US region, which is one of the very few, if not the only region in Azure that you can get the machine that has some NVMe allocated to it. And the big issue there, if you have your machine in a deallocated status, like mine is right now, that NVMe drive goes away. It is available to some other VM from some other customer. So anything you have on it, poof, it's gone. The fancy word for that is, I think, ephemeral. When you see ephemeral, think, poof, I just lost my data. So you don't want to store anything there that you can't recreate. And that is a critical piece of these 3-day classes, because you're going to be working with a very large Stack Overflow database that needs a lot of horsepower to follow along in the demos and the homework. And that's where I'm going to put that database, is on that drive, because it's a super fast drive. When you're building an index on a 100 million row table, it takes time, so it's got to be on really fast storage. Like I said, this is a standard. Then this is on Brent's page as well. An L8S V2 is the least machine you can buy from Azure or rent or whatever that meets the requirements for the class. And it runs me $28, $25, $30, something like that per day, and I just leave it running for the full 3-day class, including the day before when I check and make sure everything is good. So you're going to wind up paying $125, $150 for the machine for each time you take the class if you're going to follow along. So there's the size. You can change that bigger if you want to, but you don't need to. The disks that it comes with, this is interesting. It comes with the operating system disk, 127 gigs. That's pretty normal. It's not showing you the NVMe drive here because it's part of the VM itself. I have attached an additional drive to this machine, and that's an additional cost for those of you that are not aware how Azure works. The VM is one cost. Additional drives cost more. This is a 1 gig drive. I'm using this to store backup files. So when we get this thing fired up and I actually start the VM here in the portal, and you're going to see all of this, I'll RDP into the box. I'll format that NVMe drive. I'll allocate it into pieces, and then I'll restore the Stack Overflow database. And I can do all that in probably under 10 minutes. So if I'm on day 2 of class and something happens and my machine gets deallocated by Azure, or I accidentally do it in the portal, I want to be able to go back in and put everything back together like it was. And that includes the SQL Server installation, which I'm not going to go through, but I will show you how mine is set up to not have to reinstall all the stuff. Alright, so I've got the OS disk, I've got the data disk, and when we get in, we'll see that there's an uninitialized disk as well. So let me go ahead and get this thing started. And from time to time, as I'm doing things that are going to take a little bit of time, I'll pause this video and come right back to it. So 10 minutes of my time may go by in a few seconds of yours. Starting up, and one thing, if you're not real familiar with the VMs, if you're inside, RDP inside, and you restart Windows, that does not lose that drive. That ephemeral drive does not go away. You don't lose your data. If you restart, if you click this button in the portal, you don't lose your data. I don't lose my data. You might use yours. Don't take that for 100% gospel truth. But when you're restarting a VM, it's not going to completely deallocate and give away that drive for you. It knows it's coming right back, so it hangs on to it. It's when you hit this stop button and it gets to that stopped, deallocated state. That's when you've lost the drive. Let me refresh again. It should be ready by now. Okay, this is running, so I'm going to go ahead and connect through RDP just because that's what I do. Oh, one more point before I've got my public IP address set to static just to make my life easier. That's a choice for you. It costs a few pennies. It's not a big deal. Do whatever you want, but that way I can just use, go down here and right click and use my shortcut that I've already got without having to go download a new RDP file. So we'll do that. This is always going to have these choices here. Password is 12345. Ha, just kidding. That's what an idiot would put on his luggage. I always click these buttons, the yes buttons, and ignore, and it never matters. I know that. It's just habit. Alright, so this thing's coming up really fast, which you would expect because it's a pretty beefy machine as far as what I'm doing with it. And you can tell down here, I've got some icons already. I've downloaded some things. This machine that we're looking at right now, and I'm recording this on December 4th, this is actually a machine I've spun up in October for the parameter sniffing fundamentals class to play around with. And I'm using the Azure backup. I've had this one just sitting around in a backup vault, and I just spun it up back up. I spun the backup back up yesterday afternoon just to test it and go through some stuff before I started this recording. Let's get rid of that. First off, let's look at those drives before we look at SQL Server or anything else. Go to this PC, and you'll notice that I've got this 1 terabyte drive, which is the one I showed you in the portal. That's where my backups and just various other storage are. It's a terabyte, which I don't need, but that gives me the IOPS that I do need to be able to quickly restore onto the drives you can't even see yet because they're not there from this one. I separate those out to avoid drive contention. Now, if I had the backups on that NVMe drive, they would go away and I'd have to download them and, from wherever I got them, BitTorrent or Brent's site, whatever. This temporary storage, that's just a drive that Azure uses. Don't put anything here. It may or may not be there when you get back. If you go in here, you'll even see, there's a potential for data loss here. That's every Azure VM. There'll be one drive, usually D, but not always, that is just there for doing things at the machine level and restarting and things like that. So we don't have this, but if we go to disk management, and for those of you that don't really do system level stuff, this is not that exciting. But you can take your drives that are not haven't done anything with yet, and this one is popping up and it's saying, hey, I've got a drive I don't know anything about. What you want to do? And that is the NVMe drive. It's disk number 3 in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here. I'll make this bigger so you can see it. And there it is. No. Scroll down, Kevin. There it is. This is the 1.7 gig drive. And I've even got the setup instructions bookmarked here for you. I just want you to see on this how to set up your own lab server, and that's what we're doing. If you scroll down a little bit, it talks specifically about an Azure VM. And the same things I've been saying, and it says it will give you a 1.8 terabyte of local NVMe storage. And it erases itself when the VM is shut down. That specifically means in the portal, not if you just shut down Windows, because if you shut down Windows from inside an RDP, the VM is still running when you look in the portal. Okay, don't want to belabor that too much. So this is that 1.8 terabyte drive. I'm going to leave it exactly as it is, and I'm going to go to a little script I wrote in PowerShell, which is like the, I don't know, maybe the third useful script I've ever done in PowerShell. I'm not a big user of it, but I am a big fan. And I'll go to this and go ahead and pause the video if you want to start typing. You will want something like this yourself. It beats the heck out of doing it manually which you can do. You can go in here and start right-clicking on things and doing it. But this, it may pop up and ask me if I want to format, even though I've got format in here to do it as an NTFS file system. But all I have to do is run it and wait for it. And let's do this for fun. Let's watch the drives pop up as that script runs. I should be getting a G and an H, I think it is. No, F and G. There's some of my data and my storage. They're running, they're formatted, and they're good to go. So I'm going to have my SQL data here and my database log files here. So that was easy enough to do. Again, this makes my life a lot easier if I have to start one of these things or restart it in the portal. Because this is the drive that goes away, this drive number 3 or disk number 3. So don't need that anymore. If I go into, let's get rid of all this stuff, Management Studio, and this takes a while to open just like it does everywhere else, and it drives me nuts. Things like the Crystal Disk Mark and the other tool whose name I suddenly can't remember that are on that prerequisites page for SQL I/O stress and query stress and things like that. Use Brent's page on that. You don't need me to show you how to download something and run a tool. I just want to show you how this server is set up. While I'm at it, while we're waiting for Management Studio to start, just show you this H driver. I've got storage. I put TempDB in here as well. And I probably should have shown you that before I did anything with those disks, that NVMe drive that became my F and G, SQL Server is already up and running. Because I have everything either on the C drive or the H drive, including TempDB, which is these files here. It creates one that starts. So without that drive, that disk 3 that became F and G, SQL Server started just fine when I started the box. Okay, there we go. I stalled long enough it actually came up. So what you're going to see when I connect to this and I expand databases, you're going to see the Stack Overflow database in a recovery pending status. What that means is I don't have any files. I'm aware that that database used to exist, but I don't know what's going on. Where is it? Well, if I were able to go to properties here, it would say all the files are on the F and G, which got erased because I restarted. But I've got a job over here that just restores the Stack Overflow database. And if I go over and refresh this, you can see it's now restoring. And so now, go back, hit the job, and I'm going to pause the video. And we're back. The magic of time travel in a video. The job completed successfully, as you can see. Close. Refresh the databases, and it'll say it's sitting there. And just to make sure that we can actually do stuff, I usually just expand it. It won't work if the database is a problem. But let's do this anyway. Oh, come on. I'm being impatient today. So sorry. Let's get some data. They say never type in a demo, and they're not wrong. 1 star from users, comment, watch. This fail, because it will. That was supposed to fail. How did that not fail? Because I didn't capitalize you. Oh well, it failed in when I originally tried it. But the Stack Overflow database is supposed to be case sensitive. I can't remember if it actually is or not. It's case insensitive. That's odd. Some of them are, some of them aren't. So anyway, if yours is, or if you type in something that you know is good and you get an error message that it failed, check for case sensitivity and then go change it if you feel like it. It's not going to hurt anything. Alright, so don't need to save that. Let me show you a little bit. When I did the install of SQL Server, and I put 2017 on here, 2019 is a choice, but I just keep going with 2017's. Because Brent doesn't like 2019 right now either, therefore I won't. No, I've got different reasons. But I patched it up to some level. But I put things on the F and G drive that are user database specific. All of my system databases are probably on the C drive. I don't even remember. Probably just left them. Yeah, I left them in their default location. I set the H drive, which is my added attached disk that I had in the portal. I put that for TempDB, so that's what SQL Server needs to start. It needs the shared files that are on C. It needs the system databases on a non-ephemeral drive, blah, and it needs TempDB to be somewhere that doesn't go away. Because when you start the VM, and I can't belabor this enough, although I'll try, you have to have disks that are formatted and initialized for the system and TempDB, system databases and TempDB to live on, or SQL Server won't start, and you've got a lot more work to do every time you restart it. So, really long 15-minute story short here is I'm using a really nice machine. If I have to stop and restart it in the VM, stop and start is actually the proper term, in the Azure portal, I'm going to lose that drive that holds my F and G. So nothing there but user databases that you can use a restore job on to put it right back. And just for fun, this took maybe 8 to 10 minutes. Let's go have a look. Wow, it took even less than I thought it was. It took 4 minutes to do that restore. So because of the two different drives, backup on one file or on one drive, disks or data going to another. Gosh, I can't talk today. I'm sorry. I don't have any drive contention doing that. So when you're on a bio break and Brent says, okay, everybody restore your Stack Overflow and then run these whatever scripts for the next module, you can actually do that. Fire that off, fire that restore job off, go to your bio break, or if your machine's just giving you a hard time, you can restart it here, or you can, worst case, stop, restart in the portal, and then come in and use that PowerShell script, redo your disks, restore your database, and you're right back where you were. You can always, if you're halfway through an exercise and you want to back it up, you can certainly always do that to some other location or some other file name and then restore from that if you want to. This is the one that is downloaded and starts you off like you're at the beginning of the class. That's the one I downloaded. I don't know if it's the right size. I didn't even check to see how big this was. And now that I've said that, I'm curious. This one is 180 gigs. There's one that's bigger that's like 300 and something gigs. This worked just fine for me. Doesn't really matter which one you pull down. Just save the files that are the BAK files and then set up your job appropriately. All that is documented in this page. It's got all the stuff. Set up a restore job. There's even code. It's got all the stuff on there. How to use the query stress. How to use Crystal Disk Mark. All the stuff you need to set this up is here, except for the specifics of this Azure VM. So, there you go. I'll shut up now. Y'all have a good day.